Jasmine Carter stood frozen, hands still on the gleaming brass doorknob of the executive boardroom. "Wait outside, sweetheart. The cleaning can wait," the white VP smirked. 20 minutes later, she walked back in, their new CEO with security and termination papers for the entire management team. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice served, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If this opening grabbed your attention, hit that like button right now and subscribe to see how this powerful black woman turned the tables on a roomful of executives who made the biggest mistake of their careers. Jasmine Carter was never supposed to be in that boardroom. According to the old rules of corporate America, born to a single mother in a struggling neighborhood of Oakland, California, Jasmine had been fighting against prejudice and limitations her entire life. Her mother, Elaine, worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table, but still made time to instill in her daughter an unshakable sense of self-worth and determination. "They'll tell you what you can't do 1,000 times," Elaine would say while helping Jasmine with homework late into the night. "Your job is to show them what you can do just once. That's all it takes." By 16, Jasmine was already taking advanced placement courses and working part-time to save for college. When other kids complained about homework, she doubled down. When counselors suggested community college as a more realistic option, she applied to Harvard. The rejection letter didn't surprise her, but the partial scholarship offer that followed her passionate appeal letter did. At Harvard Business School, Jasmine found herself in an environment where people like her were statistical anomalies. In a class of hundreds, she could count the number of black women on one hand. Professors would mistake her for other black students. Study groups would accidentally form without including her. Job recruiters would speak to her white classmates at length while giving her cursory nods. Yet through it all, Jasmine excelled. Her analytical mind and innovative approach to business problems made her impossible to ignore. She graduated in the top 5% of her class, with a thesis on transforming failing businesses that attracted attention from major firms. Her career started at McKinsey, where she quickly established herself as someone who could identify the root causes of business failure and implement effective solutions. Within 5 years, she had moved on to a boutique consulting firm specializing in tech industry turnarounds, earning a reputation as someone who could perform corporate miracles. Silicon Valley insiders began calling her the Phoenix for her ability to resurrect companies from the ashes of bankruptcy and scandal. When Innotech was losing $50 million a quarter, Jasmine restructured their product development cycle and had them profitable within 18 months. When DataStream suffered a major security breach that threatened to end the company, she not only saved them, but turned their new security protocols into a profitable business line. What few recognized was that Jasmine brought a perspective that many boardrooms lacked. She saw opportunities others missed because their privileged backgrounds created blind spots. She understood markets others dismissed because they couldn't relate to diverse consumer bases. She valued talent others overlooked because it didn't fit their narrow definition of cultural fit. When Elevation Partners, one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in the country, approached her about rescuing TechVision, Jasmine initially hesitated. TechVision had been a rising star in enterprise software 5 years ago, but poor leadership, failed product launches, and an increasingly toxic culture had driven it to the brink of bankruptcy. Their stock had plummeted 80%, key talent was fleeing, and industry analysts were already writing corporate obituaries. "We need someone who can make hard decisions without being weighed down by personal relationships or company politics," explained Maria Rodriguez, Elevation's managing partner. "We need someone who sees clearly what others are too invested to acknowledge." The offer was unprecedented, complete authority to restructure as she saw fit, a substantial ownership stake if she succeeded, and a generous golden parachute if the company was too far gone to save. There was just one condition: her identity as CEO would be kept secret until the board meeting where she would be officially introduced. The board wanted to prevent the old guard from organizing resistance or sabotaging the company before changes could be implemented. For 3 months, Jasmine worked behind the scenes, reviewing TechVision's finances, product pipeline, personnel records, and internal communications. What she discovered disturbed her deeply. Beyond the financial mismanagement and strategic errors, there was a pervasive culture of discrimination. Pay discrepancies between white male employees and everyone else were substantial and systematic. Harassment complaints were buried by HR. Promotion patterns showed clear bias. Most troubling were the company's internal communication channels, where executives openly made racist and sexist comments, mocked employees from underrepresented groups, and boasted about maintaining the right culture by keeping management positions filled with people like us. Jasmine prepared meticulously for the confrontation she knew was coming. She compiled irrefutable evidence, prepared legal documentation with the company's outside counsel, and assembled a transition team of diverse, highly qualified executives ready to step in. She also coordinated with HR and security to ensure the transition would be swift and decisive when the moment came. The night before the board meeting, Jasmine called her mother. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted, "not of them, but of the responsibility. If I succeed, it opens doors for others who look like me. If I fail, baby, you've been preparing for this your whole life," Elaine replied. "Remember what I always told you about fear?" Jasmine smiled. "Feel it, acknowledge it, then use it as fuel. That's my girl. Now go make history." The morning of the board meeting, Jasmine dressed in a tailored navy suit, powerful yet understated. She arrived an hour early, not wanting her first introduction to be in the high-pressure environment of the boardroom. She wanted to observe the company's culture in its natural state, unfiltered by the knowledge of who she was. Her security detail and HR team were already in position, waiting on standby per her instructions. Everything was ready as she approached the gleaming glass headquarters of Tech Vision in Palo Alto. Jasmine took a deep breath. Today would change everything, not just for her, but potentially for countless others who deserved a fair shot in an industry that had systematically excluded them. Little did she know just how revealing her reception would be. The Tech Vision headquarters rose 22 stories above the Palo Alto landscape, a gleaming monument to innovation and success that belied the company's internal decay. As Jasmine approached the revolving doors, she straightened her shoulders and entered with the confidence of someone who belonged there, even if others might not think so. The security guard at the front desk looked up from his computer screen, his eyes narrowing slightly as Jasmine approached. She was dressed impeccably in her navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio that cost more than most people's monthly rent, yet his expression held unmistakable suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked, not bothering to mask the doubt in his voice. "I have a meeting with the board," Jasmine replied calmly, sliding her ID across the counter. Jasmine Carter. The guard scrutinized her ID longer than necessary, then made a phone call while watching her warily. Jasmine maintained her composure, mentally noting this first microaggression of the day. Finally, he printed a visitor badge labeled vendor despite her clear statement about a board meeting. "Elevators are to the right. Someone will meet you on the executive floor." The receptionist on the executive floor wasn't any better. A young, white woman with perfectly highlighted hair barely looked up from her screen as Jasmine approached. "Deliveries go to the service entrance," she said dismissively. "I'm here for the board meeting." Jasmine corrected her politely. The receptionist finally looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she regained her professional demeanor. "Oh, I wasn't told to expect anyone else. You can have a seat. I'll check if they're ready for whatever you're here for." Jasmine took a seat in the waiting area, using the time to observe the office culture. The executive floor was predominantly white and male, with the few people of color occupying administrative or support roles. She watched how differently people interacted with each other based on perceived status and race, filing away each observation. After 20 minutes of being deliberately ignored by the receptionist, Jasmine rose and walked toward the boardroom where she could hear voices. As she approached, she caught fragments of conversation that made her blood run cold. "Did you see the resume Johnson forwarded? Another diversity candidate. Like we need more of those dragging down our numbers." Laughter followed, along with more comments too low to hear clearly. Jasmine reached for the boardroom door handle, only to have a man step directly in front of her, blocking her path. Marcus Wellington, the CFO, according to her research, a tall, silver-haired man with an expression of entitled impatience. "Excuse me," she said politely. Wellington looked down at her with undisguised contempt. "Wait outside, sweetheart. The cleaning can wait," he said with a smirk. "We've got important business happening here." More laughter erupted from inside the room. Jasmine's hand remained frozen on the doorknob as she processed the casual cruelty and dismissal. 20 years of hard work, of overcoming every obstacle placed in her path, of proving herself repeatedly in an industry determined to exclude people who looked like her. And still, to this man, she could only be the cleaning staff. Jasmine slowly withdrew her hand, her face betraying nothing of the fury and determination building inside her. "Of course," she said quietly, "I'll wait." She retreated to a quiet corner of the reception area, took out her phone and sent a text to her assistant, "Initiate Protocol Phoenix." Within seconds, her phone buzzed with confirmations. Security was on standby. HR representatives were moving into position. With prepared documentation, her transition team was being notified. Everything was proceeding according to plan, but with an added personal motivation that Wellington had unwittingly provided. As Jasmine waited, she thought about all the times throughout her career she had been mistaken for an assistant, a caterer, or cleaning staff despite her credentials and position. She thought about all the women and people of color who faced these indignities daily, without the power to respond. She thought about what was about to happen and felt not satisfaction, but a sense of necessary correction. 10 minutes later, Harold Bennett, chairman of the board, stepped off the elevator. Unlike the others, Bennett immediately recognized her from their confidential meetings. "Ms. Carter, I'm so sorry. Have you been waiting long? I expected them to escort you in immediately," his voice carried, turning heads throughout the reception area. The receptionist's eyes widened. Wellington, who had emerged from the boardroom to greet Bennett, froze mid-step, confusion replacing his earlier arrogance. "It's no problem, Mr. Bennett," Jasmine replied, her voice carrying clearly. "I was just told by Mr. Wellington here that the cleaning could wait until after your important business concluded." Bennett's face darkened with anger and embarrassment. "I see," he said tightly. "Well, shall we proceed with our important business then? The board is eager to meet our new CEO." The blood drained from Wellington's face as the implications of his mistake became clear. Jasmine met his eyes briefly as she walked past, her expression perfectly professional, revealing nothing of the reckoning to come. Sometimes, she thought, justice arrives with perfect timing. Harold Bennett placed a protective hand on Jasmine's shoulder as they entered the boardroom together, a gesture not lost on the assembled executives, whose expressions ranged from confusion to dawning horror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bennett announced, "formally, I'd like to introduce Jasmine Carter, TechVision's new Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." The silence that followed was absolute. 8 faces stared back at her, processing this information at different rates. Sarah Whitfield, VP of Marketing, was the first to recover, plastering on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Richard Keller, the CTO, looked like he'd been struck. Others simply gaped. Marcus Wellington, who had followed them into the room, broke the silence with a harsh laugh. "This is a joke, right, Harold? We haven't approved any CEO appointment, let alone..." He gestured dismissively at Jasmine without finishing his sentence. "The majority shareholders have approved Ms. Carter's appointment," Bennett replied coldly. "Elevation Partners, who as you know holds controlling interest since the last funding round, has full confidence in her ability to lead TechVision through this critical transition." "Transition?" Wellington's voice rose. "What transition? We weren't consulted about any transition." Jasmine placed her portfolio on the table and addressed the room for the first time. "That's correct, Mr. Wellington. You weren't consulted because, quite frankly, you're part of the problem." She opened her portfolio and began distributing folders to each executive. "These contain individualized reports detailing the specific reasons for your termination, effective today. But before we get to that, I'd like to share some of my findings from the past 3 months with practiced precision." Jasmine activated the boardroom's presentation system from her tablet. The large screen at the end of the room illuminated with a dashboard of company metrics that none of the executives had seen before. TechVision is losing $4.6 million monthly, with a burn rate that will exhaust remaining capital. Within 8 months, she began, her voice steady and authoritative. Product development is 18 months behind schedule. Employee turnover is 68% annually, 3 times industry average. She clicked to the next slide. But these are merely symptoms. The disease runs deeper. The screen filled with internal emails, Slack conversations, and HR reports, all highlighting a pattern of discrimination, harassment, and toxic leadership. Would you like to explain why complaints of racial discrimination are systematically buried, Mr. Hoffman? She asked the HR director, who had gone pale. Or perhaps Mr. Wellington can explain why female employees earn 74 cents on the dollar, compared to male counterparts in identical roles with identical qualifications. Jasmine continued methodically through her presentation, detailing financial mismanagement, ethical violations, and leadership failures. With each new revelation, the executive's expressions shifted from shock to fear. For 3 months, I've had full access to every system, every communication, every decision made by this leadership team, Jasmine explained. What I found was not merely incompetence, though there was plenty of that. What I found was a systemic rot that begins at the top and has infected every level of this organization. She clicked to a final slide, security camera footage from just 20 minutes earlier, showing Wellington blocking her from the boardroom and dismissing her as cleaning staff, followed by the laughter of his colleagues inside. This incident is merely the latest example of the culture you've created, Jasmine said, her voice now carrying an edge of controlled anger. A culture where assumptions are made based on race and gender. A culture where arrogance substitutes for competence. A culture that has driven this company to the brink of failure. The room had gone deathly silent. Some executives stared at the table, unable to meet her gaze. Others looked shell-shocked, struggling to process how completely the power dynamic had shifted. I've been brought in to save this company, not to continue the practices that have nearly destroyed it, Jasmine continued. TechVision has brilliant employees who have been systematically marginalized and undervalued. It has innovative ideas that have been smothered under bureaucracy and ego. It has potential that has been squandered by this leadership team. Do you think Jasmine should give any of these executives a second chance? Comment number 1 if you believe in immediate accountability. Or number 2 if you think everyone deserves an opportunity to change. Hit that like button if you're enjoying this story of corporate justice. And subscribe to hear more stories of barriers being broken. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your workplace? What would you have done in Jasmine's position when Wellington told her to wait outside? Let's see what happens next as these executives realize just how badly they've underestimated the woman standing before them. Marcus Wellington was the first to recover from the shock, his face flushing deep red as he slammed his palm against the polished conference table. "This is outrageous," he shouted, looking to his colleagues for support. "You can't just walk in here and fire an entire executive team based on some cherry-picked data and out-of-context conversations." Jasmine remained perfectly composed, watching him with the patient expression of someone who had anticipated every objection. "Mr. Wellington, your termination packet includes 37 documented instances where you personally blocked the promotion of qualified women and people of color," she replied. "It also includes emails where you explicitly instructed HR to find reasons to reject diverse candidates. Would you like me to read them aloud?" Wellington's strategy shifted instantly. "This is nothing but reverse discrimination. You're firing us because we're white. That's illegal, and we'll sue this company into oblivion, actually." Jasmine countered, opening another folder. "You're being fired for cause, discrimination, financial malfeasance, creating a hostile work environment, violation of fiduciary duty." The documentation is extensive and has been reviewed by outside counsel. She turned to address the entire room. "Each of you is being offered a severance package contingent upon signing a non-disclosure agreement. These terms are generous considering the circumstances, but non-negotiable. Those who choose not to sign will receive no severance and face the possibility of legal action for their documented violations of company policy and, in some cases, federal law. Sarah Whitfield, VP of Marketing, who had remained silent until now, suddenly adopted a conciliatory tone. Ms. Carter, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I've always been an advocate for diversity in the workplace. Just last quarter, I sponsored a women's leadership lunch. Jasmine didn't blink. Ms. Whitfield, you personally ensured that the women who attended that lunch were subsequently passed over for promotion in favor of less qualified male colleagues. You then joked about it in emails to Mr. Wellington, referring to it as feeding the diversity beast while keeping the real power where it belongs. The timestamp on that email was 3 hours after your public speech about empowerment. Whitfield sank back into her chair, her strategic retreat crushed by the weight of her own documented hypocrisy. Richard Keller, the CTO, tried a different approach. You're making a catastrophic business error, he said, his voice low and threatening. I have personal relationships with our 5 largest clients. They trust me. If I leave, they leave. And TechVision loses 60% of its revenue overnight. For the first time, Jasmine smiled. I've already spoken with the CTOs at Meridian Systems, Westlake Financial, Global Tech, Pinnacle Enterprises, and FutureCore. They're excited about TechVision's new direction, particularly our renewed focus on product quality and innovation. In fact, 3 of them mentioned they've been considering moving to competitors due to the declining quality of our support under your leadership. Keller blanched. You can't have. When did you? 2 weeks ago, Jasmine replied. They were quite forthcoming once they understood the nature of the changes we'll be implementing. As the implications of Jasmine's thorough preparation became clear, the unified front of the executive team began to fracture. Some grew resigned, quietly reviewing their termination packages. Others became openly hostile, making threats about lawsuits and reputation damage. James Peterson, VP of Sales, who had remained unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. I've only been with the company for 10 months. I had no part in establishing these practices. His voice held a plea for exemption. Mr. Peterson, within 2 weeks of your arrival, you reassigned all major accounts from female sales representatives to male ones, resulting in significant commission losses for those women. When questioned, you stated it was to put our best foot forward. The data shows those women had better close rates than the men you favored. Peterson slumped in defeat. As the resistance crumbled, Marcus Wellington made one final, desperate stand. Rising to his full height, he loomed over Jasmine. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've built relationships you couldn't possibly replicate. My contract includes a golden parachute that would bankrupt this failing company if triggered. And I have enough dirt on everyone in Silicon Valley to ensure you never work again. If you pursue this vendetta, Jasmine didn't back down an inch. Your contract's golden parachute has a moral turpitude clause, which your documented behavior has triggered, rendering it void. As for your relationships and threats, she paused, meeting his gaze steadily. Mr. Wellington, the world is changing. The protection that men like you have enjoyed while behaving badly is eroding. Your relationships won't save you because the people you've relied on are facing their own reckonings. She gestured toward the door, which opened to reveal security. Personnel and HR representatives waiting outside. Your access to company systems has already been revoked. Security will escort you to collect personal belongings, after which you will surrender your badges and leave the premises. Any attempt to access company data or contact employees will void your severance and trigger immediate legal action. Wellington's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this. All of you will regret this day. No. Mr. Wellington, Jasmine replied calmly. The only regret here is that this action wasn't taken years ago, before you could damage so many careers and nearly destroy a once great company. As security stepped forward, the executives realized that Jasmine had anticipated every move they might make, neutralized every advantage they thought they held, and left them no option but to accept the consequences of their actions. The resistance had failed before it even began. The executive boardroom emptied gradually as each terminated leader was escorted out individually. Jasmine had strategically planned the sequence, removing the most volatile personalities first while separating allies to prevent them from coordinating resistance. As Marcus Wellington was led away, his face a mask of barely contained rage, Jasmine turned to Harold Bennett, who had witnessed the entire proceeding in silent support. "That went almost exactly as anticipated," she said quietly. Bennett nodded. "Elevation Partners was right about you. You're not just brilliant, you're fearless." "Not fearless," Jasmine corrected him. "I'm terrified. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." While security handled the executives' departures, Jasmine didn't waste a moment. She immediately called for a meeting with all department heads and middle managers, the people who would be crucial for maintaining stability during the transition. The company's large conference room quickly filled with 37 anxious faces, all aware that something momentous was happening, but unclear on the details. Jasmine entered the room and introduced herself confidently. "Good morning, I'm Jasmine Carter, TechVision's new CEO, as of 30 minutes ago. The entire executive leadership team has been terminated." The collective gasp was audible, nervous. Glances were exchanged across the room. "I understand this is shocking news," Jasmine continued, "but I believe in transparency, so let me explain exactly what's happening and why." For the next 40 minutes, Jasmine outlined the state of the company, the financial precariousness, the toxic culture, the systematic discrimination, and the strategic failures that had brought TechVision to the brink. She shared selective evidence, enough to establish the legitimacy of her actions without humiliating the departed executives unnecessarily. "I'm not here to assign blame beyond those who have already been removed," she assured the room. "I'm here to rebuild, and I need your help to do it." The tension in the room gradually shifted from fear to cautious hope. As Jasmine outlined her vision for TechVision's future, she emphasized merit-based advancement, transparent decision-making, and a renewed focus on the innovative products that had once made the company an industry leader. "I've assembled a transition team of executives who will step into leadership roles effective immediately," Jasmine announced, gesturing to the door as 5 people entered, 3 women and 2 men, representing diverse backgrounds, but united by impressive credentials and experience. "Maya Patel will serve as interim CTO." Jasmine introduced a woman in her 40s with a distinguished career at Google and Apple. "David Chen will step in as CFO." A man of East Asian descent nodded confidently. "Gabriela Rodriguez will lead marketing. Tariq Johnson will head product development, and Sophia Washington will direct human resources." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The new leadership reflected a diversity that TechVision had conspicuously lacked, but each introduction was accompanied by qualifications that were undeniable. These weren't token appointments. These were highly accomplished professionals who had been overlooked by an industry with persistent blind spots. "For the next week, my door is open to anyone who wants to speak with me directly," Jasmine told the assembled managers. "I want to hear your concerns, your ideas, and your insights. You're the institutional knowledge of this company, and your input is invaluable." As the meeting progressed, Jasmine could see the mix of emotions play across people's faces: relief from those who had suffered under the previous regime, apprehension from those who had benefited from it, and cautious optimism from most. When the meeting concluded, Jasmine's new HR director, Sophia Washington, approached with a concerned expression. "We may have an issue," she said quietly. "Since the announcement went out, we've received 17 reports of discrimination and harassment that were previously unreported or buried. I expect there will be more." Jasmine nodded grimly. "Set up an anonymous reporting system immediately. Bring in outside counsel specializing in workplace investigations. I want every claim taken seriously and addressed properly. Some of these incidents go back years." Sophia warned, "The legal exposure could be significant. We'll face it transparently." Jasmine decided, no more cover-ups. If TechVision needs to make amends for past wrongs, that's what we'll do. By mid-afternoon, news of what employees were calling the purge had leaked to tech industry media. Jasmine's phone lit up with calls from journalists seeking comment, venture capitalists questioning the stability of their investment, and even competitors testing for weakness. TechVision's stock dropped 12% in the initial panic, but stabilized by the end of the trading day, as analysts began to consider the company's new direction. A few even upgraded their ratings, noting that dramatic action had been necessary given the company's trajectory. Meanwhile, in the building's main lobby, Marcus Wellington was creating his final scene. Having refused to leave quietly, he was loudly proclaiming conspiracy theories and threats of litigation within earshot of employees and a few opportunistic smartphone cameras. This company is being destroyed by a diversity hire, he shouted as security guards firmly but carefully guided him toward the exit. 20 years I gave to this company. This is how they repay loyalty. The spectacle he created would be on social media within minutes. But Jasmine had anticipated this too. The contrast between Wellington's unhinged behavior and her own composed professionalism would only reinforce the necessity of the changes she was implementing. By evening, when Jasmine finally returned to her temporary office to gather her things, she found an email from Harold Bennett with a simple message: "The board is unanimously behind you. Whatever you need, you have our support." Jasmine smiled. Tiredly, day one was complete. The cleansing had begun. Now came the harder part, rebuilding something better from the foundation up. 1 week after what the tech press had dubbed the TechVision massacre, Jasmine sat in her office reviewing the latest wave of negative coverage. The Wall Street Technology Journal had run a particularly scathing piece titled "Radical Diversity. Agenda Claims Veteran Tech Leadership," while the conservative business network BizMax featured a panel of older white male executives lamenting the witch hunt atmosphere in Silicon Valley. More concerning were the anonymous threats that had begun appearing in her email and social media accounts. Everything from promises to destroy her career to explicit threats of violence. TechVision's security team had been augmented in response, and Jasmine had reluctantly accepted their recommendation for personal protection when traveling to and from work. Her assistant, Layla, entered with another stack of messages. "The board meeting is confirmed for 2 o'clock, and there's been another client escalation. Brightwater Systems is considering pulling their contract." Jasmine sighed. "Let me guess, Marcus Wellington reached out to them. Their CIO and Marcus play golf together apparently." This was becoming a pattern. Over the past week, TechVision had discovered that Wellington had been systematically contacting clients, spreading misinformation about the company's stability, and suggesting they consider moving to competitors. 3 smaller clients had already jumped ship, citing concerns about leadership continuity. Jasmine's phone rang. Harold Bennett, chairman of the board. She braced herself before answering. "Jasmine, we need to talk about the Davidson and Pierce situation," Bennett said without preamble. Davidson and Pierce were board members who had been close to the former executive team, particularly Wellington. "They're calling for an emergency vote on your leadership. They're citing the stock price drop and client departures." The stock had fallen 18% since the executive changes, though it had stabilized in the last 2 days. Still, some investors were panicking, and the board was feeling the pressure. "We have the votes to defeat their motion," Bennett assured her. "But this is just the beginning of their resistance. They have connections throughout the industry. They're calling in favors, spreading rumors." "I expected this," Jasmine replied, though privately she was disturbed by the intensity of the backlash. "We're making necessary changes that threaten an entrenched power structure. They won't surrender privilege without a fight." After ending the call, Jasmine closed her office door and allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. The constant pressure was taking its toll. She'd barely slept in days. Her family had received harassing calls, forcing her to move her mother temporarily to a hotel under a different name. The quarterly numbers looked worse than expected as the company adjusted to the transition. Key talent was being aggressively recruited by competitors sensing weakness. Even some of the middle managers who had initially supported the changes were wavering as the path forward proved more difficult than anticipated. Was I naive? Jasmine whispered to herself in the empty office. Did I underestimate how deeply the resistance would run? Her phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Eleanor Wright, her former professor and mentor from Harvard Business School. Saw the BizMax hit piece. Remember what I told you about breaking barriers. The harder they fight you, the more they reveal how necessary your presence is. Stay strong. History is watching. Jasmine took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and opened her laptop. The backlash wouldn't defeat her. It would only strengthen her resolve. That evening, Jasmine called an emergency strategy session with her new executive team. They gathered in the conference room, faces showing the strain of the challenging transition. "I won't sugarcoat this," Jasmine began. "We're facing coordinated opposition from powerful interests, both inside and outside the company. They're betting that we'll falter under pressure, that we'll compromise our vision to appease them." She looked at each team member in turn. "That's not going to happen. We're going to counter their moves systematically and strategically." Throughout the night, they developed a comprehensive plan to address each challenge. For the client concerns, they would personally visit each major account to reinforce relationships and demonstrate the new team's competence. For the talent retention issue, they would accelerate the rollout of their new compensation structure that eliminated historical inequities. Most importantly, they would fast-track their product roadmap to show tangible progress. TechVision's core offerings had stagnated under previous leadership. Demonstrating innovation would silence critics more effectively than any PR strategy. As dawn broke and the team finally dispersed to catch a few hours of sleep before the workday began, Maya Patel, the interim CTO, lingered behind. "I need to tell you something," she said hesitantly. "I've been offered a position at Oracle. Triple my current salary, guaranteed autonomy, the works." Jasmine felt her heart sink. Losing Maya would be devastating, not just practically but symbolically. "I'm not taking it," Maya continued, surprising Jasmine. "I've turned down better offers before, but this is the first time I've worked somewhere that I feel might actually change things. Not just succeed as a business, but change the whole damn system that's kept people like us sidelined for decades. I'm all in, Jasmine, whatever it takes." Do you think Jasmine and her team will be able to overcome this backlash? Comment number 1 if you believe they'll triumph against these obstacles. Or number 2 if you think the forces aligned against them might be too powerful. If you're inspired by Jasmine's courage under pressure, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and determination. Have you ever stood firm for what's right, despite facing intense opposition? What gave you the strength to persevere? The journey ahead for Jasmine will test everything she believes about herself and the possibility of real change. Let's see how she begins rebuilding TechVision in the face of such determined resistance. 3 weeks into her tenure as CEO, Jasmine stood before the entire TechVision workforce in the company's largest conference space. Employees filled every chair, lined the walls, and watched remotely from satellite offices. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. "Today, we begin TechVision's true transformation," Jasmine announced, her voice carrying confidently throughout the room. Not just a change in leadership, but a fundamental reimagining of what this company can be. The presentation screen behind her illuminated with a bold new company vision statement: "Innovation through inclusion, excellence through equity." For the next hour, Jasmine outlined a comprehensive plan that addressed everything from product development to company culture. The centerpiece was a transparent salary structure that eliminated historical pay inequities. No more hidden compensation. No more negotiated advantages that typically favored white male employees. Every role had clear salary bands based on skills and experience, visible to all employees. Secrecy around compensation has only served to perpetuate inequality, Jasmine explained. Transparency creates accountability. She introduced a revamped promotion system that relied on measurable achievements, rather than subjective evaluations that often carried unconscious bias. Mentorship programs would pair promising employees from underrepresented groups with senior leaders. Most radically, Jasmine announced a recruitment initiative specifically targeting diverse talent that other tech companies had overlooked. TechVision will become the company that recognizes potential others miss, she declared. That's not just a moral imperative, it's a competitive advantage. The final segment of her presentation focused on product innovation. Under previous leadership, TechVision had chased competitors' features rather than pioneering new solutions. Jasmine revealed plans for a complete product overhaul that would center user needs currently ignored by the industry. Our diverse workforce will create products for a diverse world, she explained. We'll succeed by solving problems that homogeneous teams don't even recognize. As the presentation concluded, Jasmine opened the floor for questions. There was a moment of hesitation before hands began to rise, tentatively at first, then, with growing confidence as employees realized this CEO genuinely wanted their input. The questions ranged from practical concerns about implementation timelines to emotional expressions of hope and skepticism. Jasmine answered each honestly, acknowledging challenges while maintaining conviction in the path forward. One question came from a young black woman in the engineering department. We've heard promises before. What makes this time different? Jasmine appreciated the directness. Fair question. 3 things make this different. First, these aren't just initiatives. They're structural changes in how we operate. Second, my compensation is directly tied to achieving these goals. And third, she smiled slightly, I fired everyone who would have sabotaged this transformation. The tension in the room broke with laughter and spontaneous applause. For many employees who had suffered under the previous toxic culture, this moment represented something they'd never experienced at TechVision. Hope, the implementation wasn't smooth. Decades of entrenched practices couldn't be changed overnight. Some employees who had benefited from the old system resisted the new merit-based approach. A few quit in protest, but for each departure, Jasmine's team found there were multiple talented employees eager to step up when given the opportunity. The employee resource groups that Jasmine established became vital channels for feedback and innovation. The women in Tech Group identified critical flaws in the user experience of TechVision's flagship product that had been overlooked by previous male-dominated development teams. The Black Professionals Network proposed a partnership with HBCS that brought in promising interns and entry-level talent. The LGBTQ+ Alliance suggested features that made TechVision's software more inclusive for all users. 6 weeks in, the first measurable results appeared. Employee satisfaction scores, which had been dismally low under previous leadership, improved by 22%. Retention rates stabilized as the initial uncertainty gave way to enthusiasm about the company's new direction. Most surprisingly to industry observers, TechVision's product development velocity increased dramatically. Teams that had been paralyzed by toxic management and fear of failure were now empowered to innovate. The first major release under Jasmine's leadership delivered features that had been promised for years but never completed. Early adopter clients responded enthusiastically to both the improved products and the company's new direction. Westlake Financial, which had been considering dropping TechVision, instead expanded their contract. Their CIO explained simply, for the first time, we feel like we're working with a partner who listens rather than dictates. Jasmine's leadership style contributed significantly to the company's revitalization. Unlike her predecessors who remained isolated in executive suites, she regularly worked alongside different teams, understanding their challenges firsthand. She instituted no-rank Fridays where hierarchical titles were temporarily set aside. To encourage open communication across levels, the press began to notice the changes. TechCrunch ran a feature titled TechVision's Renaissance: How New Leadership is Redefining Tech Culture. The article highlighted not just the business turnaround, but the innovative HR practices that were becoming industry talking points. When the first quarter under Jasmine's leadership concluded, the financial results showed modest but significant improvement. Revenue had stabilized, the burn rate had decreased by 30%, and the product pipeline was the strongest it had been in years. At the quarterly all-hands meeting, Jasmine shared these results transparently, celebrating the progress while acknowledging the work still ahead. We've begun to change our culture and our trajectory, she told the assembled employees. But transformation isn't an event, it's a process. We're just getting started. As she concluded her presentation, Jasmine noticed the young black woman who had questioned her at the first meeting. The employee gave her a small but significant nod of approval, a gesture that, to Jasmine, meant more than any financial metric or press coverage. Real change was happening, and despite the challenges still ahead, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. TechVision was becoming the company she had envisioned, one where excellence and equity reinforced rather than opposed each other. The rebuilding was well underway, but as Jasmine would soon discover, the greatest challenge was yet to come. The breaking news alert flashed across Jasmine's phone during a crucial product review meeting. Former TechVision executives launch competitor, Visitech, targeting enterprise clients. Jasmine maintained her composure as she quickly scanned the article. Marcus Wellington had assembled 5 of the 8 terminated TechVision executives to form a direct competitor, backed by venture capital from Sequoia Ridge Partners, a firm known for its conservative approach and traditional leadership preferences. Visitech aims to provide stability and proven leadership in the enterprise software space. Wellington was quoted saying, with the clear implication that TechVision under Jasmine's leadership lacked those qualities. More concerning was Wellington's explicit statement about targeting TechVision's client base. We understand the needs of enterprise clients because we've served them successfully for years. We're already in discussions with several major accounts looking for a more stable partner. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine's phone rang. It was their largest investor, Franklin Morse from Elevation Capital. I assume you've seen the news. Morse began without preamble. I'm concerned, Jasmine. Wellington knows your client relationships intimately. His new company is explicitly positioned as the safe alternative to your experimental approach, Franklin. Jasmine replied steadily. We anticipated this possibility. The non-compete clauses in their termination agreements specifically prohibit them from poaching our clients. Non-competes are notoriously difficult to enforce, Morse countered, and litigation would only reinforce the narrative that you're struggling. My partners are questioning whether your cultural transformation agenda has distracted from core business priorities. The implication was clear. Morse was under pressure to pull his support, which would be catastrophic for TechVision's recovery. Before Jasmine could respond, her assistant urgently appeared at the door. Emergency situation. Legal needs you immediately. In the conference room, TechVision's legal team had grim news. They'd discovered evidence of a coordinated effort by Wellington and his allies to download proprietary code and client information in the days before their termination. More alarming, they found indications that backdoor access had been created in TechVision's systems. They're not just competing with us, Jasmine realized. They're actively trying to sabotage us. As if the situation weren't dire enough, a notification appeared on Jasmine's laptop. A media alert from BizTech News with the headline, TechVision CEO under fire. Sources question Carter's stability and decision-making. The article quoted anonymous insiders describing Jasmine as vindictive, out of her depth, and prioritizing social justice over shareholder value. The piece referenced declining quarterly numbers without acknowledging the improvement trajectory, and highlighted client departures without mentioning new acquisitions. It's a coordinated attack, Maya Patel, the CTO, observed. Hit us financially by stealing clients, technically by compromising our systems, and reputationally through media plants. An emergency call from the sales team brought more bad news. Wellington had contacted Meridian Systems, TechVision's largest client, claiming that key features they relied on would be deprioritized under Jasmine's new product roadmap. By evening, market analysts were issuing concerned reports about TechVision's stability, citing Wellington's new venture as a proven alternative for enterprise clients seeking continuity. Jasmine called an emergency meeting of her executive team, legal counsel, and key board members, including Harold Bennett. The mood was somber as they assessed the multi-pronged attack. We need to take decisive action, Jasmine declared. First, legal will file for an immediate injunction against Wellington and Visitech for theft of intellectual property and violation of non-compete agreements. The legal counsel nodded. We have solid evidence. The backdoor access attempts are particularly egregious. Second, Jasmine continued. IT security will conduct a comprehensive sweep for vulnerabilities and close any potential access points Wellington may have created. Maya Patel spoke up. Already underway. We're also accelerating the system architecture, changes that will render their stolen code obsolete. Third, our communications team will issue a statement addressing the false claims about our strategy and stability. We'll be transparent about the transformation process while highlighting our recent wins. Jasmine turned to Harold Bennett. I need the board's unified support. Wellington will try to exploit any perceived division. Bennett hesitated. Davidson and Pierce are calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. They claim this crisis proves their concerns about your leadership. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. TechVision was fighting for its survival on multiple fronts, and Jasmine's position was increasingly precarious. When is the vote scheduled? Jasmine asked quietly. Tomorrow at noon, Bennett replied. I've tried to delay it, but they've secured enough support to force the issue. Jasmine nodded, her mind racing through scenarios. Then we have until noon tomorrow to change the narrative. Through the night, Jasmine and her team worked relentlessly. The legal department prepared comprehensive documentation of Wellington's ethical violations. The security team traced and sealed the system vulnerabilities. The communications department crafted a strategy that would highlight TechVision's transformation without becoming defensive. Most critically, Jasmine personally called each board member, presenting the facts and her counter-strategy with calm determination. Some were receptive, others non-committal, a few openly hostile. By dawn, Jasmine had done everything possible to prepare for the noon showdown. She returned to her office to review her presentation one final time before the board meeting that would determine TechVision's future and her own. As she sat at her desk, exhausted but focused, her assistant rushed in with news that seemed like the final blow. Goldman Financial is threatening to pull their 8-figure investment if the leadership situation isn't stabilized immediately. They've cited concerns about the experimental nature of our new direction. Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The phrase was a direct echo of Wellington's talking points, evidence that his influence extended even to their financial backers. When she opened her eyes, her assistant was still standing there, but now with a puzzled expression. There's someone in the lobby insisting on seeing you before the board meeting. She says it's urgent, and you'll want to hear what she has to offer. Who is it? Jasmine asked, not having time for distractions. Amara Washington, CEO of Horizon Technologies. Jasmine's eyebrows rose in surprise. Horizon Technologies was one of the largest enterprise software companies in the world, and a potential competitor. Why would their CEO be here now? Send her up immediately. 10 minutes later, Jasmine was shaking hands with Amara Washington, a distinguished black woman in her 50s whose reputation as a brilliant strategist was legendary in the industry. I'll be direct, Washington said after declining coffee. I've been watching TechVision's transformation with great interest. What you're building here isn't just a company. It's a model for what the industry could be. Jasmine waited, sensing there was more. I'm also familiar with Marcus Wellington. He tried similar tactics at NextGen before joining TechVision. The man is a dinosaur fighting against extinction. Washington placed a folder on Jasmine's desk. Horizon Technologies would like to enter into a strategic partnership with TechVision, beginning with this contract. Jasmine opened the folder and nearly gasped at the figure on the first page. It was larger than their 3 biggest contracts combined. This isn't charity. Washington clarified. Your new product direction aligns perfectly with gaps in our offering. This is good business. But I'd be lying if I said I'm not also invested in seeing a company led by a woman who looks like us succeed in transforming this industry. As Washington stood to leave, she added, I'll be making this partnership public at 11:30 this morning. I thought you might find that timing useful for your noon meeting. At exactly noon, Jasmine walked into the boardroom with quiet confidence. Davidson immediately began his attack, citing the creation of Visitech, client concerns, and market analyst warnings as evidence that her leadership had failed. The experiment has clearly failed, he concluded smugly. We need to Return to proven leadership approaches before shareholder value is completely destroyed. Harold Bennett, sharing the meeting, turned to Jasmine. Ms. Carter, your response? Jasmine stood, distributed folders to each board member, and began speaking with steady determination. What Mr. Davidson calls an experiment has in fact proven remarkably successful despite coordinated attempts to undermine it. She began. The folders before you contain 3 key documents. She walked them through each. First, the legal filing against Wellington and Visitech for intellectual property theft and contract violations, including evidence that had already convinced a judge to issue a temporary restraining order that morning. Second, the latest financial projections showing the company's improving trajectory despite the challenges of transition. And finally, the partnership agreement with Horizon Technologies, signed just an hour earlier. This partnership alone represents a 40% increase in our projected annual revenue. Jasmine explained. It's not just financially significant. It's a vote of confidence from one of the most respected companies in our industry. The mood in the boardroom shifted visibly. As board members reviewed the documents, Davidson appeared stunned, while peers studied the Horizon contract with disbelief. The vote before you today isn't really about my leadership, Jasmine concluded. It's about whether this board has the courage to embrace meaningful change, or whether it will retreat to comfortable patterns that were slowly destroying this company. The choice is yours. Harold Bennett called for the vote. The result was 9-2 in favor of maintaining Jasmine's leadership, a resounding endorsement that would silence questions about her authority. As the board members filed out, many stopping to congratulate her, Jasmine allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. Wellington's counter-strike had failed. The path forward would still hold challenges, but TechVision had survived its most critical test. The transformation would continue. 1 year later, Jasmine stood on the stage of the National Technology Innovation Summit, adjusting the CEO of the Year award she'd just received. The audience of industry leaders, investors, and media representatives had given her a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. A year ago today, she began her acceptance speech. I was told to wait outside a boardroom because someone assumed I was the cleaning staff. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the audience, most of whom were familiar with the story that had become something of a legend in Silicon Valley. That moment could have been just another indignity in a career filled with them. Instead, it became the catalyst for transformation, not just for me or for TechVision, but potentially for our entire industry. The numbers told an extraordinary story. Under Jasmine's leadership, TechVision had not merely recovered. It had thrived beyond all expectations. The company's stock had risen 320% over the past year. Quarterly profits had broken records for 3 consecutive quarters. Their new flagship product had captured market share at a rate that stunned analysts. Most remarkably, TechVision had become the industry leader in workplace equity and inclusion, with metrics that other companies now benchmarked against. Employee satisfaction scores ranked in the top 3% nationally. Turnover had plummeted to historic lows. Applications for open positions had increased 7-fold, allowing TechVision to attract exceptional talent across all demographics. The conventional wisdom said that prioritizing diversity and inclusion would compromise excellence and profitability. Jasmine continued. The conventional wisdom was wrong. TechVision's success proves that equity and excellence aren't competing values, they're complementary strengths. In the audience, Jasmine spotted familiar faces, her executive team, beaming with pride, her mother, Elaine, dabbing at tears, Harold Bennett, who had championed her from the beginning, and even Amara Washington from Horizon Technologies, whose strategic partnership had helped secure TechVision's future. Our journey wasn't without obstacles. Jasmine acknowledged. We faced coordinated opposition from those who benefited from the status quo. Visitech, the competitor formed by our former executives, filed for bankruptcy protection for months ago. This reference drew murmurs from the audience. Marcus Wellington's venture had collapsed spectacularly after losing a decisive legal battle with TechVision over intellectual property theft. The final blow had come when Wellington himself was recorded making racist and sexist comments about Jasmine at an industry event, destroying what remained of his reputation. Last week, something remarkable happened. Jasmine continued. I received an email from Marcus Wellington, the executive who told me to wait outside that boardroom a year ago. The audience grew silent, hanging on her words. It was an apology, a genuine acknowledgement of his behavior and its harmful impact. He wrote that watching TechVision's success forced him to reconsider beliefs he'd held his entire career. He admitted that his resistance wasn't really about my qualifications, but about his fear of a changing world, where people like him might have to compete on truly equal terms. Jasmine paused, letting the significance of this revelation settle. I share this not to vindicate myself, but because it represents the deeper change we're working toward. Not just different faces in leadership positions, but a fundamental shift in how we think about merit, opportunity, and human potential. She shifted to the broader implications of TechVision's transformation. Our industry talks constantly about disruption, but too often we apply that concept only to technology, not to outdated systems of power and privilege. Real innovation requires diverse perspectives. Real excellence demands that we tap the full spectrum of human talent. Jasmine outlined the initiatives TechVision had pioneered: transparent compensation structures that eliminated historical inequities, recruitment partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities, mentorship programs that identified overlooked talent, flexible work arrangements that accommodated caregiving responsibilities, and product development processes that incorporated diverse user perspectives. These aren't just feel-good programs, she emphasized. They're strategic advantages that have directly contributed to our market leadership. The response from other companies had been remarkable. Dozens of tech firms had adopted similar approaches after seeing TechVision's results. Industry conferences now regularly featured sessions on inclusive leadership and equitable workplace practices. Venture capital firms were increasingly funding diverse founders. The change is happening, Jasmine said, too slowly for some, too quickly for others, but it's happening nonetheless. She concluded by announcing the launch of the Carter Foundation, funded by a portion of her TechVision equity, dedicated to supporting minority entrepreneurs and technologists. This foundation isn't about charity, she clarified. It's about investment in people and ideas. In the future we want to create. It's about removing artificial barriers to excellence and innovation. As she left the stage to another standing ovation, Jasmine felt a profound sense of closure. The journey had been more difficult than she'd anticipated, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and exhaustion. Yet the results had exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Back at TechVision headquarters the following week, Jasmine was interviewing candidates for a new leadership development program when she met Zora Johnson, a brilliant young software engineer whose background and demeanor reminded Jasmine powerfully of herself 15 years earlier. Your application is extremely impressive, Jasmine noted. MIT undergraduate, Stanford master's, innovative work in AI ethics. Why TechVision? With your qualifications, you could go anywhere. Zora straightened slightly. Because of you, Ms. Carter. Because of what happened in that boardroom a year ago. Because you showed that we don't have to accept being told to wait outside anymore. Jasmine nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in that statement. Well, Ms. Johnson, I look forward to seeing what doors you'll open for those who come after you. Later that afternoon, Jasmine walked through the executive floor that had once been the exclusive domain of men who looked nothing like her. She paused at the boardroom where it had all begun, running her fingers over the doorknob that had once been denied to her during the renovation 6 months earlier. Jasmine had made one symbolic change to the boardroom, replacing that brass doorknob with a new design that required no key or special permission to enter. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. A reminder that spaces of power should be accessible to all who had earned the right to be there. As she pushed open the door and entered the room, where she now regularly led the company's most important meetings, Jasmine reflected on how a moment of discrimination had become the catalyst for revolutionary change, not just for one company, but potentially for an entire industry. Some would call it poetic justice. Jasmine simply called it progress. Jasmine's story illustrates how systemic discrimination persists in corporate America, particularly in the tech industry where diversity remains a challenge. Her journey reveals that transformative change requires more than just individual success. It demands structural reform and the courage to dismantle entrenched systems of power. The most powerful lesson is that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, but a business advantage. TechVision succeeded precisely because Jasmine brought perspectives that had been missing, identified opportunities others overlooked, and built an inclusive culture that unleashed talent previously suppressed. We also learn that resistance to change is inevitable when privilege is threatened. Those who benefit from the status quo will fight fiercely to preserve it, using every resource at their disposal from economic pressure to reputation attacks. Most importantly, Jasmine's story teaches us that a single moment of discrimination can become a catalyst for revolutionary change when met with strategic brilliance, unwavering determination, and the courage to stand firm despite overwhelming pressure. True leadership isn't about maintaining comfortable systems, but about creating better ones, even when the path forward is difficult. What powerful moment in this story resonated with you the most? Have you ever stood up against discrimination? In your workplace or community, share your experiences in the comments below. If Jasmine's journey inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful racism stories that highlight both injustice and triumph. Share this video with someone who needs courage to challenge the status quo. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most qualified person is the one told to wait outside. Together, we can change that reality.